Good evening. This is Jack Wilson, and I'm going to take about an hour, try to keep it maybe 45 minutes. And if you have any questions, just type them in as we go. I'll look at them at the end, unless you've got something really burning, and maybe type it in all caps or something. Oh, good. I sound good. Okay, great. So just a little background about myself. I think you saw the bio, but mainly about 4 years ago, we were looking for some other development environment to use migrating from Lotus Notes applications. And we looked at several things, and a friend of mine showed me Instant Developer, and I really liked it, and we've been using it ever since. So what I want to do today is just take a scratch using the tool, and then I can show you some other things if we have enough time, some pretty applications on what you can do with it. But it's really a tool for database applications. It makes it very easy to do a lot with very little coding, so you can get into the coding if you need to for more control. But anyway, let's just kind of dive in. So I've got the Instant Developer environment up now. I'm going to create a new project, and this is actually, at this point, you could run it, you wouldn't see much, but it's kind of the hello world. It gives you a whole framework of everything to use. So I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to call it the Northwind project, or actually I'll call it Express, because we're using the Express version, which is a free downloadable version you can get from the website. And this will be a Northwind example. Okay, and I'll talk a little bit about this. The undo feature is quite nice. I'm going to set mine to 500 because I like to make lots of changes. Okay, let's save this, and I'm going to create a new folder for it and call it NW Express, and then that's the file name. So it's now in the file system. Okay, let's bring in a database, and I have a database example already. I'm going to call it Northwind Database, Northwind Data. And you notice that it defaults to Access, but it has all these different database types it can use. I do quite a bit of programming with MySQL and Postgres, and SQL Server are the main ones I do. But we're going to leave and just use Access to keep things simple. And it defaults to the full path name of where you grabbed it from, but it simplifies things quite a bit if you use a relative path, especially if you ship a project off to somebody else where they have their own user directory. So I'm just using relative path there. There's the database. It's Access. Don't need a username or password. And so he's there. Okay, so now we have the database connected to the project, but there's no data in it yet. So what I'm going to do is import him in. So if I right-click, and the IDE and the whole programming paradigm of this is a lot of clicking and shift and dragging, and so if you don't like using the mouse, this is not your product. All right, I'm going to right-click, do an import structure, and do I want to import him? Yes, I do. And I'm going to import all the tables, so just select all the tables. And so it's brought in these 8 sample tables and all the schema that's associated with them, primary keys, fields, foreign keys. And in fact, you can look at a graphic design of it and see all the relationships that it brought in. So like any good application developer who's doing a lot of database work, if you've got the database defined properly, it saves a lot of time going forward with the program. For me, it just kind of falls out if the data is correct and the relationships are good. It makes it so much simpler. Okay, so we've got the database in here, and the next thing I want to do, see how they're all kind of white at this point. That means that you've imported them in, but you don't have any control over the schema. So if you wanted to make changes on the instant developer side and then push them to the actual database, then you need to take ownership. And what you can do is on this side, you can select, on the right-hand side, you can select everything at once. I just did just a normal shift click down here at the bottom. If I right-click, I can take ownership of all those tables at once. And then it reminds me to sync the ZZ object table. And that's a private table that it uses. You can see it just doesn't normally show up. And that's how it keeps up with the schema changes that you make on your end, so it can synchronize them together. So it's reminding me to do that, and we'll do that here in a minute. So we've got ownership of all these tables, and I could right-click on a table, do a show data on the wizard, and you can see that there's actually data in here. And so that's hitting the Access database locally. Okay, so we've got the tables, we've got ownership of them. Now let's look at an application. We'll just call him, say, NWWeb, example app. And notice that he defaults to, in fact, the Express version only supports the Microsoft.NET or C#. But you can also, if you pay, even the lowest level paid version does Java as well, either one. And I support probably 2/3 of my clients are C# and the rest are Java. And I can use the same code base and just flip the switch and either output Java code for run on a Tomcat server or C# code to run Windows IIS. So that's a nice feature. Okay, so we've got an application and we've got data. So let's hook them together. So before I do that, I want to do a couple of things. I want, if you've ever used a entity framework that Microsoft put out a few years ago, if you're not familiar with that, it's just a way to buffer data using classes, kind of classes you have in object-oriented programming, as an interface between your program and the database itself. And you don't have to use that in Instant Developer, but if you do, you get a lot of neat benefits with it. And I'll show some of that. But you can just strictly use the tables directly. You don't have to use a class. But I like to use the classes, so I'm going to do that. One thing to make it a lot easier, if you open up any of these tables, you'll notice that all these names are plural. But the classes are generally singular. And that's just, you see that in other database schema, and a lot of object-oriented frameworks do that. So just to keep it standard, I'm going to go ahead and rename all these elements, and this is just what the class name is going to be when I create that. So I'm going to rename each of these to just be a singular, and I'm opening up each one here, but I could do it this way. I could open up a property window and click on each of those and do it here as well. Most of the things you can select a whole bunch and do them at once, but this is one where you have to do them one at a time. So it's just easier to get it over with and be done with it. Okay, they're all there. Okay, now we've got our tables. We're ready for classes. So now here's where we get to some fun part. So we've got all these tables, and what I'm going to do is create a class for each of these tables. But I can do it all at once. I can select them all over here on the right, and I'm holding down my left mouse button and I'm dragging them over to the program application. And then if I hold down different keys, you see at the very bottom where it says, I'm down in here. If you look right now it says adds an IMDb table, which is an in-memory type database. If I hold down the Shift key, it says I could add a form. And if I hold down the Control key, I could add a lookup form. And if I hold down both the Control and the Shift key, it's going to add a document class. So that's what I want to do. So I'm holding down Control Shift. I let go of my left mouse button, and it's added these 8 classes. And the classes have the properties already. You can add methods as well, and it has a lot of built-in methods with the classes with the framework. But you can see how, for example, category, I've got 4 fields there. I've got the same 4 fields up here in the database table. So it's just a one-to-one correspondence right now between table field names and property names in the class. Okay, now we've got the classes. Let's create the forms from the classes so we can edit stuff. So if I come back over here, on the right-hand side is where you can select multiple stuff. I'm going to grab all these classes, and I'm going to drag them again to the application. And this time I'm holding down the Shift key. At the bottom, it tells you what it's going to do, add a form. So let go of the left mouse button, give it a second, and it created 8 forms and 1 lookup form, which it did for us automatically based on the relationships. I can organize these things. It already has a little lookup forms folder. I'm going to stick him over there. And I've got all these forms right here. I'm going to drag them down to the forms because I like to have things organized. But if you don't have a folder already there, I can right-click, create a folder, and create one called classes. Okay. Then I can drag all the classes into the classes folder. So now it's very organized over here. Okay. So we've got classes, we've got forms, we need something to be able to access them. We have a menu that it gives us. I'm going to grab all the classes right here, get in the right spot, and I'm sorry, not the classes, I want to do the forms. I already got those. Let's grab all the forms and drag them to the forms list. I didn't have to hold down Control or Shift, it automatically adds all those. So now I've got a menu item for each of these guys. So we should be able to run the program now and see something. So let's do that. And before I do that, you'll notice I've got the database where I can make changes. And I want to go ahead and create this ZZ Objects table so we'll have it. It's not there now, but once it has it, it's based on what it knows about. So then if I make any changes on the instant developer side, it'll be able to make those same modifications in the database. And we're compiling for the first time the application. So click OK. It's going to create the ZZ Objects. Let's see, make sure one more time. Make sure I didn't tell it to blank everything out. Yeah, we're good. Okay, and let's go. So it added that ZZ Objects table into the Access database. And compiling the app. Launching Chrome is what I have on this machine. So now we have a basic program. I've got a menu item for each of these tables, or actually classes, that are forms using the classes as the data. So click on these. It defaults to a query by example type thing. If I click the little search, it'll go find the data that we saw a minute ago in the wizard. I personally like to have data pop in immediately, and it's so fast that you can have thousands of records and it'll page load each screen at a time. So we'll make a little change to do that. So, I mean, technically this is program. We've done that fairly quickly and haven't written any code yet. Okay, let's go back to the program. And let's change things around a little bit. We've got the categories form, and then the nomenclature here, we have forms, and forms you can think of as windows, and a window can have one or more objects on it. In this case, they're panels, and the panels are fed by the classes or by a table or multiple tables in the database. And you can tell they have all kinds of icons. That's the class icon. That's the form is kind of a yellow square with little grid things, and the white one's the panels. And you kind of learn these as you go. Okay, let's go into the panel, and it defaults to search QBE. I'm going to make him be find data and save that. Turn that off. And let's do the same thing for, well, we'll hold off a minute on that. So there's, if I run him now, then it should look the same, except when we bring in the category option. Now he pops up immediately. I didn't have to do the search. He's already there. Okay, let's make things a little more interesting. Now these are all parent-child categories, if you remember the design. We've got categories, and products are a child of categories. So let's see if we can link those together. If we go back to our classes, category can contain products. So what we can do is create a collection of products and stick them in category. And the way you do that is you hold down your shift key or your mouse key, left mouse, drag him up to the category. I'm holding down my shift key, and at the bottom it says as an object as a variable. I don't want that. I want a collection, control key, collection. Let go of him, and it created a collection that doesn't have anything in it right now, but it's products. And it can do that because it knows the relationships you've already got with category and products. Okay, so let's go back to our categories form. Let's drag that guy up here. We'll rearrange him a little bit. We'll leave the picture there, and let's get a little more room. And now what I want to do is put products down here. So I've got the product class. I'm going to, before I do that though, I need a place for him to go. So we've got one form here that has one panel on it. I can split this form into multiple grids or areas. I'm going to split them vertically. So I have an empty frame, still got the original frame up there. I'm going to drag a product over here. And so there's the whole, and it gives you all that at once, just like it did automatically when it made all the forms. And it does its best guess. These are big fields. Well, that's a big field. These are actually lookup fields, is why they're down there in slightly blue. I'll show that here in a minute. Let's stick him up here. Okay, so you'll notice now over here on the left, we've got the products panel, we've got the categories panel, and you see the little orange, that's like an arrow, and that means that he's clicking to a master, and this is a master detail type thing. So the category is the master form, and the products are the children of it, which will be a little clearer here in a minute. So let's compile this again. Now if we go to categories, you see this down here, and if I click on, say, condiments, then down here they're changing because they're linked and filtering based on the parent you select here. And since we use the classes, this is effectively all in memory for editing purposes. So if I want to, let's say, make a change, Here's seafood. If I click the little lock to unlock him, now he's editable. I could go down here and maybe add an X to that guy and come to the next row, and as soon as I do that, he puts a little star there and says I've changed the data. So you could have multiple joins, multiple tables in here, but you're editing all as one unit. Do whatever changes you need, add whatever. And then you say, oh, I didn't want to do that. You could click on the little cancel up here, or either one. And since I'm doing it up here, he set them all back the way it was. So it's a great way to edit stuff, go back, and that's all built into the framework. You can see you've got a little Excel export, and these buttons can be hidden, added. You can make this look like anything. I've got a little PDF I can show you if we have time of. Remember, this is an Italian-based company, so most of their customers are in Italy, and they have a lot of pretty fancy sites that they've built over the years. But we're just using the basic look out of the box today. And they have a few themes. This is a Zen theme, but they have some others, including Bootstrap, which has a responsive type theme. So we've got these guys hooked together. And everybody's functioning, playing nicely, which is great. So let's go back and let's look at some other interesting pieces of this. Now, currently, the Northwind all defaults to using a counter. If you look at the primary key for category, for example, he's a counter, 1 through 10, whatever. If I add somebody, let's say we add a new product to this one, we're still editing. We'll call him test 1, and if I save him, he created an incremental key, 78, all integers. Well, what I want to do is switch it to use a GUID type key, which is generated on the client. And the advantage to that, of course, is if you've got offline apps on a mobile device, for example, they can create their own primary key, and then when they replicate the data to the server, they don't have to worry about getting a primary key from the server. That's the great advantage to it. And they've made that very easy for you. They've got a whole document identification service built in. And you don't have to use it. You can just use counters and integers. You don't have to use classes. You can just use regular tables. But if you really want to get the power of it, I highly recommend you learn a little bit about the classes. And it's just quite a bit of fun to do. But anyway, let's do one. We'll do the category and the product, and I'll show you how that works. And once you set it up, that's it. You don't have to think about it anymore. So the way it works is it has this document identification service. It has several services built in. And if you go and create a domain, which is what it uses for that, and this is all in the user guide. The user guide's almost 500 pages, and it is in English. And it's quite good. And I haven't read the whole thing. I was going to use it more as a reference. I probably should sit down and read it. But it's got a lot of great information. It's very well written. And so what we're going to do, what it uses by default is a 20-character GUID, which is not just straight ASCII characters. Well, they're all ASCII characters, but it's not just letters and numbers. There's, funny characters in there too. But since it uses more than just the A through Z and hexadecimal and stuff, like a normal Microsoft GUID, for example, is a 36-character one, 32 of hexadecimal characters and 4 dashes in there. So this one saves space, which is an advantage. So anyway, it's a 20-character ID. And once again, this is all documented in the manual. For it to work, it has to be a character of fixed length because it's got to be exactly 20 characters. And the concept down here at the bottom is that. And I usually like to allow these variables. Of course, the primary key by definition isn't nullable. It's got to be unique. But if you've got a secondary key or a secondary field for a foreign key, it might be null at a point in time if it doesn't have a parent to attach to. So I like to have the flexibility there. Okay, so that domain is there, and if he wasn't there, he would complain in a minute and say he needs to be there. So that's a one-time setup. And then let's take a class like the category class, and I'm going to have him use the document identification service, which is what that DOID is. I'll save him, and I'm also going to do him for the product. And save that. Okay, so now if you go and look, say at category ID, he was a counter, as you recall, and an integer, and now he's inherited this document ID domain. Now, how did he know to do that? Well, he knew because that's the primary key, only one there, and you were changing the class that's linked to that table. So that's another nice feature about Instant Developer. It's the actual code that's stored in the IDE is a relational database. So every field is really in there one time. A variable name is in there one time. So if you've got a variable named Fred and you want to change him to Susie, then you change him in one spot and he changes everywhere within that scope, which is quite nice. So we've got that one there, and so products, he did the same thing for us as well. If we look at his primary key, it did the same thing. Okay. So now that's a pretty major change whenever you change a actual primary key. So if I right-click the database and show structure differences, it says I cannot compute them because I've got to create a new database structure. No problem. We can recompile, and this time we're going to have it save existing data. And it does a pretty good job with this, but anytime you're making modifications to your database, it's always a good idea to have a backup of it. A lot of times if the database isn't too big, I'll bring it down from a production server, modify the changes on my machine just to make sure it's going to be okay, and then when you publish it later, it can make those changes as well. But it's not a good feeling if you've made so many weird changes and you go to publish it and suddenly the order of the fields that it applies the changes to, something messes up, and that's not a good thing. So you want to make sure it's going to work on production data. But anyway, we're going to recreate the structure, and we're going to save the existing data and click OK. It's going to rebuild it. Made a backup? Yes. Okay, so you basically wiped out all the tables, made the modifications to the schema, and reloaded them. So now it should look the same, but if we went and added another category here, like test food, and save him, instead of a number, he's got this 20-character unique identifier, and it created that locally, not on the server. Same thing down here. If you added a product, then we get the ID there. While I'm here, I've got these lookup fields, and that's a nice thing that it does for you. If you think of where you've got a lookup table with you're storing maybe a number, but you're showing a text field. That's what these guys are here. This is category product names. Beverages is 1, condiments is 2, and you can see that changing over here. You can see those are the actual letters, words that go with the number. And you could make this an auto lookup field, or you can use this type of lookup here that it gives to you automatically. But you can see that it's actually saving the number because it's changing the number over here. Normally you wouldn't have both these fields showing, but that's to kind of show what's going on. Okay, so we've done quite a bit here. Haven't written any code yet. I may have to show you a little code just so you can see what I was talking about a minute ago. Okay, let's do something fun. It has more than just grids. You can do graphs. You can do reports. Quite a bit of stuff. I wanted to show you a graph real quick. So, but this time I'm going to use a database instead of the classes. So we've got orders right now, and orders contains order details. If you remember from the graph of the database, we've got order details, and there's orders right there. So let's see if we can do something with that. If we look at our forms, we've already got a orders form. Let's go into him, and let's just drag all that up there to get him out of there. Okay, make that a little smaller. He's quite big, isn't he? Okay, and then let's put the, we'll make a little extra panel, extra frame there, and we'll go ahead and put the, let's do the order details, and I've got a class for him, so we'll do that one. But what I really want to do, I just wanted you to see that so you can see the totals, is create a graph down here. So we'll put a third frame, and this time we'll use, we're going to right click and have him create a graph, which is just gives you a little barcode graph there. And it supports several different types of graphs. It started out with a fusion chart graph, and that's kind of gone to the wayside. And then they added a JS free chart, a J free chart, which depended upon Java, and it only worked in 32-bit, so that's kind of gone away. Then they came up with a using JavaScript, JQplot, and that works on the clients, and it'll work on even a mobile device because it's all in JavaScript. So that one's pretty good. And just in the last few months, they've added the Google charts. So let's do a Google chart. Okay, so we've got a graph. Let's give him a name. We'll call him graph orders. And he's got a master query right here, which is the data we're going to use for the graph. So we're just going to chart order details, child of orders. Let's do something from that. So I'm just going to drag that table over there, and I want to put, there's lots of cool shortcuts, like I could add all these fields right here. If I just drag that guy to the from field and hold down my control key at the very, very bottom of the screen, you'll see it says adds all the fields of that guy all at once, which is nice, especially if you've got 100 columns in your table. In this case, so all I really care about is I would like to have the quantity times the price. That would be the actual dollar value. So let's just say quantity times unit price, and let's call him total dollars, let's say. And then we can get rid of the discount. Okay, and probably let's do quantity. That probably makes more sense. So quantity, and then so we'd be graphing quantity versus total sales, I guess. Okay. Then the other thing, since it defaults to the Fusion chart, you have to tell it what the library is. So let's go to the, there's lots of events on these guys. I should mention that. Every object, pretty much every object, has its own set of events. So remember, the form is the window. You can think of it like that. So you've got window types events like load and unload, activate, etc. On the panel, you've got a whole different set of events, a lot of events. Before things happen, after things happen, and then more events I suspect are ones that they added later and just put that over there. So some more GUI kind of stuff there. Okay, well what I want is the actual load event for this form. So if we go to the load event, add him, and all I'm going to do is set the graphic. I could just drag that guy over there to get him in there, and I want to do it, and it's got IntelliSense type stuff. So if I just type lib, it pops up whatever's I want to set the library, and if I hit the space bar right here, it pops up the different types of graphic libraries that are in there, and I want to do a Google chart. So that'll set him to Google chart. Okay, so that should be enough, I think. We've got graphs, we've got order details, and remember the order detail. Oh, one more little crucial thing here. Since we're using the database and not the classes, I need to tell it the linkage. In graphs, you have to use database tables or an in-memory table. They don't currently support pulling the data from a class into a graph. Okay, and once again, that's all documented, but I'll just remind you here. So let's do a where on here, where we want to link him. So the link will be the, this is from order details. So the link on order details would be the order ID. Is that right? No, yeah, order details, orders. So if you look at orders, he's got the same one here. So if we say order ID equals, in this case, we're going to actually link him to what's on the parent panel, which would be order ID as well. Okay, so let's see what that does. I think that's all we need. We'll see. So compile that. And if we go to orders, we've got our three things here. And now I didn't do the find data, so I got to find it some data. And as soon as I did, you can see down here at the bottom, I got 4, 6, 10, 12. And if you look at the total quantities, the biggest quantity I've got is 12. If I switch over, say, to this guy, he's got more quantities. And so the graph changed down here. So we're plotting quantity versus total dollars. So that's all hooked up because I've got the, just like this guy is changing here, these guys change and that guy changes. So it's all good. So, okay, so I'm doing pretty well. I want to get this part done in 45 minutes. I got 4 more minutes. Let me show a few little pictures from other apps, just to get an idea what all you can do. If you can see that okay, just don't have to read it. Just look at different screen designs that people have done. Because you've got a lot of control over the classes and CSS and all that kind of stuff. There's another one. They've used some of the fancier Google chart things. You've got all those available to you. Just some other different looks. I'm not a graphic person by any means, but I certainly have made good friends with some. Can make my stuff look good. So just want to get an idea. Don't be put off by my little stuff out of the box. Okay. Well, that was the main things. I kind of flew through that, and I don't expect you all to, retain a lot of that. I just wanted to give you a feel for what's out there, and some of the things you can do without any code at all. I did want to show you a little code though. I mean, that's a little code, I guess, when I hook that guy up. But that's just a select statement. If I go, say, to a class, for example, and classes have events as well. I've got properties that it gives you, but I could add events to the class, whole different set of class there. I could add a procedure, which is really a method test. And where I was talking about the when you make a change, so if I create say a string variable like that, and then say something if stest1 equals Jack, and do something. Now, if I change the name of this variable from test1 to test52, then it automatically changes it down here, which to me is just fabulous. I wish every development environment could do that, so you don't have to, because I love to change my variable names and table names and column names, and you can do that to your heart's content. And even changing the table-based names, it'll rename them when you synchronize. So that's one of my favorite features. And I mentioned I did a previous webinar about 3 months ago, and it was titled 17 Reasons Why I Love Developing an Instant Developer. And that link is there. I'll paste that in the chat. I think I see some questions there. But if you go to that link, there's a link from that to an hour and 46-minute webinar I did, which is totally different from this one, where I go into some more of the advanced features, and even have an example program that you can download and a database you can set up with. So paste that link in there. And of course, the instantdeveloper.com if you want to go up there and download the Express. Okay. All right. Can you show us how to deploy this app to, say, Azure? Okay. Yeah, any kind of, I've got stuff that I use Amazon, actually, but any type of, virtual server out there you can do. If you look at that other presentation, I actually do that in the, there's a whole, it's called ID Manager, and they have a Java version and a C# version, and they ship with the paid product. And you can use it to publish to a server. You can set up the database connections in your published program. They don't have to be, obviously, the same ones on your local one. And you can set all that up, and then it's very quick to, and when you publish things, it only publish, you can tell it to publish everything, or you don't tell it to only publish what's changed, the differences. It's very, very fast to do that. You can even make the database schema change when you publish, if you have enough rights to do that. Let's see, what else do we have up here? How will it be deployed to the web? How do I have to set up before I can deploy the instant and make it accessible? Right. The lowest version to do that is the standard version. They have 3 different levels, and when you go to the website, the pricing is in euros, and they sell it per month. I guess some people do that, but I personally like to buy the perpetual version, which is a lot cheaper, especially in the long run. And the standard version is limited to 50 forms, which may not sound like a lot, but the biggest app I've done so far has 36 forms in it. And the forms are just the forms themselves, that little guy right there. That doesn't count panels or classes or tables or any of that stuff. So it's pretty good. If you go to the actual project, you can see I've used 10 forms in this little thing right here. And you can reuse forms. There's lots of ways to make the same form look very different if that's gets to be an issue. But I haven't run into I mean, I guess if you're creating huge, enterprise apps, maybe you could do it. But you can have more than one project. I mean, it's not like you're limited to just one project. Okay. Yeah, so the prices are up there, and they're in euros, and you'd have to check with the sales. If you send an email to sales@instantdeveloper.com or fill out the little form on the website, you can get more information. It's not a cheap product. I mean, it's not for somebody who just is going to program every once in a while. It's for somebody who is really a either full-time developer or is working for a company. There's cheaper things out there. There's more expensive things out there. We've really enjoyed it. I've got my own license, and then I also work with another company where we have a couple licenses. We really took to it just because we were coming from a Lotus Notes background, and it was pretty similar, and it was just very easy to pick up. And so we've been porting desktop and web apps over using it. As far as additional costs, that's another advantage. There's no runtime to buy. It's royalty free. You do not have to purchase a separate WAS or web application server. It will either run on the IIS, which of course comes with Windows servers, even 10 and XP and those guys, Windows 7. For Java, you can run Tomcat, which is free. I mean, you can pay for Java WASs. There's certainly WebSphere and JBoss and those guys, but I just run Tomcat in production. Never had any trouble. What skills? Oh, wait a minute, make sure I'm not skipping anybody. Okay. Is a subscription model for the developer? Yeah, they do have. It's a perpetual license, and you can buy it once and that's it. Obviously, if you want to have updates, you'll have to do maintenance, and maintenance is a fraction of what the full price of the product is. So it's so much a year. But you could do a subscription where you only rent it every month when you want to publish something, and you can do quite a bit with the Express. I mean, with 20 forms, you can do a lot. You just cannot publish out there for it. So yeah, no additional costs other than the hosting platform. What skill set would you expect or assume as a baseline? Ideally, you're pretty familiar with databases. I mean, it does a lot for you, but the whole thing keys on having a proper database set up with relationships and to really get the power of it, because it'll do so much for you, but it's got to have those relationships built in so it knows that the category is apparent to the product or those kind of guys. If you've got that, then but there is a learning curve. I mean, it's like there's a lot to it. I mean, I learned something, I wouldn't say every day, but at least once a week I'm going, oh, I didn't know it could do that. So it's, which is great. I mean, I don't want something that I'm going to outgrow too quickly. And they're always improving it. They're pretty good about it. They release about 3 versions a year. They kind of do a yearly number. I mean, they're up to, let's see, this is 16.5. So they usually do like 16.0 and maybe April, and then summer 16.5. I've seen them do like a .0, a .1, and a .5, but usually about 3 a year. And they're very open to suggestions. They've put a lot of things in there that I've asked for. Oh crap, I meant to show you that. Totally forgot that. I was going to show you real quick, if we've got time, to do a mobile app. So we've got the web app, and and we've got the classes. So let's create a mobile app real quick. So if we go up here, we can add mobile application, just like a web app. And let's call him, we'll call him NW Mobile Example. Okay. And he needs something to work with. So let's do a class. And ideally, you put these classes in a component that can be shared by everything. but I'm going to cheat real quick and just do a customer down here, and I'm going to copy him and control copy him so he's another class. So I've got a class down there. He's still linked to the database. Let's create a form, same way as you do. I'm holding down the shift key, getting a form, and let's then add this form to the menu. Okay, and I'm going to turn off the compilation for him, so we just get the mobile, and let's see what that looks like. Oh, one other thing, I want to change the framework. I want to use the Ionic. Androids, so let's do, I need to change his compiling parameter. The theme defaults to mobile 7. Let's do Ionic, save that, and then once he's saved, we should be able to compile. Okay. All right. So it's defaulting to a tablet. Click on customers. There's those guys. I can go into that. And this is an online app. You can make an offline app, which is a whole nother webinar. But basically, you create a web app that can be your API server, effectively. And then the offline app can reach that web app and synchronize data back and forth. And it has all this synchronization built in if you use the document orientation that I showed you with the document identification service. It has a synchronization service as well. So you can do stuff. Okay. So, but that's the tablet. If I wanted to look at him, while I was still there, so I can see what he would look out on an Android versus an Apple. I can click here and rotate him, see what he'd look like in different resolutions. And if you know the URL, do I know him? Let's see. If I do phone, I think that's right. No, maybe phone 5. Yeah. Okay, so that's the same app, but now he's mobile, and you can do that when you compile him too. That's just kind of a cheat way to do it. So it's a pretty nice little look that the Ionic framework gives you to make it look like a native app, even though that's a web app that would be running on a device. Okay, yeah. So yes, you can do offline mobile apps. They are not native apps per se. What they do is they actually run inside a native shell. And there's a program out there on the app stores, Google Play, and the App Store on iOS, Apple, called Caravelle, which is a web browser, but also you can test your apps using that. And when you deploy an app to a store, it actually uses that same kind of Caravelle app, but it's the native shell that wraps it. So you're still got a real app out there in the store. Still have to submit it to Apple to be approved, and well, Google's kind of the Wild West. But anyway, it's a hybrid app, but it's got a lot of access to the camera and those kind of things from the native shell. That's Caravelle, yes. No, I'm just running the emulator here. It's kind of hard to show the Caravelle in this thing, but you can go to their site or look it up. Just look for Caravelle but you can actually set up, once you've registered and have a paid app or bought a license, then you can set up your own little testing, and basically you've got your own little unique identifier, and then in Caravelle you can effectively publish your app to it. So it makes it really easy to test until you actually stick it in a store somewhere. Okay, that answer all the questions. So database, we're comfortable, good. Yeah, I mean, the more you know, the better. The actual code is really a simplified version of they call it the Visual Code, but it looks very similar to JavaScript and Java and C#, though you don't have to type semicolons. But you can say, if I do a view source code, that's what it's actually creating. That's C# code. And if you're using either Microsoft SQL or Oracle, you can create stored procedures inside Instant Developer, and it will compile them and create the source that you can publish to the actual server. It only works with MS SQL and Oracle. Other ones you can import in from, say, Postgres or MySQL, but you cannot do this create them and have it compile. But at any point, you can look at the source of what you're writing to see what it's going to compile it to, which is pretty nice. And it compiles, I mean, it's compiling JavaScript, it's compiling, creating, it's got this whole, obviously, JavaScript framework, but it's compiling stuff for you, the C# code in that. And you can customize the JavaScript side, there's hooks in for that. The C# side, you can import in C# code. I had to do a credit card processing system, and they gave me the example in C#. So, great. I just tweaked it a little bit so it would interface properly and include that in. Yes, you cannot edit. Well, on the JavaScript side, you can pretty easily. On the C# code, no. If it's generated it, it's going to generate it. Now, you can put your own stuff in the events, but you're still writing in their code. But you can create your own libraries, your own functions. If you look at the database library here that comes in with everything, if we go, say, to standard library, you've got all these functions that come with the product, and they work on both C# and Java. But if you create your own function, if you want it for both environments, then you have to create it a C# version and a Java version. If you're just going to work with C#, you don't have to do that. You can just pick one, the C# one. But you can add your own libraries in here, which is great. But okay. All right. Any other questions? So yeah, instantdeveloper.com, go there. I encourage you to download the Express version. It's free. Play with it. And then the best way to learn it is, honestly, replay this. Try to mimic everything that I did. That's how I learned it. I took some classes, and of course they're out of Italy, but they're Italian. I mean, they're English. Well, Italian's great, but their English is very good too. We took some classes that they taught in English, and I would basically just replay the video and just go backwards, and I would emulate everything the instructor did, and that's how I learned it. Not by watching somebody do it, but actually you sitting down and doing it. So did you see my email address, or are you typing that in? Maybe I need to type that in. It is Jack Wilson at wilsoncomputerservices.com. Yeah. Did I spell that right? Yeah. And then sales at instantdeveloper.com if you're really interested, or I can refer you. My real motivation here is to try to get some more English-speaking people using it. I mean, there's a few of us here in the U.S. and England. There's safety in the herd. I would like to see a lot more people using it. It's an extremely powerful product, and it's just not very well known outside of Italy. But they're really, they publish English versions and Italian versions. The forum, there's an English forum and an Italian forum, and sometimes the Italian people hit our forum first because it's first in the order. So you sometimes see Italian posts in there, but I use Microsoft Translate or Google Translate and read the Italian forums all the time. Okay, Peter in Germany, good. We're all over. And so, yeah, so that's about the same time zone, I guess. They're in bed now. Well, you should be in bed, yeah. How long have I been around? I think since it's about 1299, I think. the fellow who started the company, he's also the same guy who wrote the English User's Manual, so obviously he knows it. I don't know how many people are employed. There's quite a few, and they're a Google partner on Google Cloud App Partner, and they have a whole nother set. This is the foundation I've been showing you, but they have some strictly cloud-based products as well. They're growing, and we really hope to get more U.S. people here, so I can. It just helps me a lot to have other developers using the tool. I post a lot in the forum, and it's a great knowledge base we're building, so I'd like to get more people using it. Yeah, I even respond in the Italian forum using Google Translate all the time. It does a pretty good job. But there's probably 10 times as many posts in the Italian forum as there are in the English forum, so I'm always trolling it to see if there's anything interesting. So it's fun. It's very, very international programming. But they actually wrote the product initially in English, and so that's you see all these. That's what the Italian people see to a lot of extent. And if you look at the source code it generates, some of it's in Italian, some of it's in English. But all the code words, of course, are English because it's C# or Java. So I've tried to learn a little Italian. I've been to Italy a couple years ago, so I'd like to go back. Okay, well, I hope that that was kind of a whirlwind thing, but I just wanted to get you a feel for the tool. Hopefully get you a little excited about it, because I really enjoy working with it, and it's kind of fun after 30-something years of programming to look forward to getting up every morning. Ooh, what can I do today? And the tool of my choice. So whatever you pick to use, just make sure that it brings you joy, because that's what it's all about. Okay. Well, thank you so much, George. I know your microphone's out. I appreciate you helping me get everything set up, and Sally with the emails, and hope you guys have a good day and take a little more look at it. All right. Okay. Oh yeah, yeah. I get a new mic tomorrow. Yeah, definitely. I've got a really cool one. I like my bit. Well, thank y'all so much for attending.